Something unusual is happening behind closed doors in Washington, and most people don't realize how serious it is yet. The conversation isn't about elections or speeches or campaign promises. It's about fear, controlled fear, strategic fear, and whether the President of the United States is deliberately using it as a weapon against one of America's most dangerous adversaries. Donald Trump's approach toward Iran is raising alarms across intelligence agencies, diplomatic circles, and foreign capitals because this isn't traditional diplomacy. It's something far more unpredictable. Some officials are calling it reckless, others are calling it calculated, but everyone agrees on one thing. This strategy could change the Middle East forever. Make sure you're subscribed right now because once you understand what's really happening, you'll realize this story is far bigger than a single headline. At the center of it all is what experts refer to as the Madman Theory, the idea that a leader gains leverage by convincing enemies he's capable of doing absolutely anything. No limits, no red lines that can be counted on. The goal isn't stability. The goal is uncertainty so extreme that the other side becomes too afraid to act. This theory dates back decades, but it's rarely been embraced so openly by a modern U.S. president. And now Trump appears to be reviving it. Not quietly, but right out in the open. Over the past several weeks, Trump has sent mixed and seemingly contradictory messages about Iran. One day he signals openness to talks. The next he warns of consequences that he refuses to describe. Behind the scenes, U.S. military readiness in the region has quietly increased. No formal declarations, no clear timelines, just enough movement to be noticed by Tehran. This isn't accidental. Intelligence officials say the ambiguity is the message. Iran is supposed to wonder what comes next, not know. For Iranian leadership, this creates a dangerous dilemma. If Trump is bluffing, calling his bluff could strengthen Iran's position. But if he's not bluffing, misjudging him could trigger a catastrophic response. That uncertainty forces hesitation, and hesitation is exactly what this strategy is designed to produce. But there's a problem. When fear replaces communication, mistakes become more likely, not less. And then there's the nuclear issue. Everything circles back to that. The United States believes Iran is closer than ever to developing nuclear weapons capability. Iran insists its program is peaceful and defensive. Years of inspections, sanctions, withdrawals, and failed negotiations have destroyed what little trust once existed. Trump's strategy doesn't try to rebuild that trust. It sidesteps it entirely. Instead of asking Iran to believe the United States, it asks Iran to fear it. What makes this moment especially volatile is that unpredictability only works if everyone believes it's real. If Iran concludes that Trump's threats are exaggerated or inconsistent, the entire strategy collapses. Worse, it could provoke Iran to accelerate exactly the behaviors the U.S. is trying to prevent. History shows that nations under extreme pressure don't always surrender. Sometimes they double down. Within Iran, Trump's rhetoric is being used by hardliners to justify resistance. They frame the U.S. as inherently hostile, incapable of compromise, and driven by humiliation rather than security. Moderate voices arguing for engagement grow quieter when threats grow louder. Meanwhile, ordinary Iranians bear the cost. Economic pressure, isolation, and uncertainty continue to rise, fueling resentment not just toward the U.S., but toward their own leadership as well. And this is where the strategy becomes truly dangerous, because once unpredictability becomes policy, even allies can't be certain where the limits are. Military planners prepare for worst-case scenarios. Intelligence agencies monitor every movement. Markets react to rumors. All it takes is one misunderstanding, one overreaction, one incident interpreted the wrong way, and events begin to move faster than anyone can stop them. Supporters of Trump argue that this is exactly why it works, that fear forces discipline, that ambiguity keeps adversaries off balance. They point to moments in history where overwhelming pressure led to concessions. But critics counter that the modern Middle East is not a chessboard. It's a web of alliances, grievances, and armed actors where control is an illusion. Right now, Iran is watching, waiting, calculating. So is the rest of the world. Because the next move doesn't just determine U.S.-Iran relations, it determines whether unpredictability can actually produce stability or whether it simply accelerates confrontation. And as this strategy unfolds, one thing is becoming clear. Once fear is unleashed as a tool of policy, it doesn't always stay pointed in the direction you intended. And this is only the first crack in the surface. because what comes next depends on how Iran responds, how Trump escalates or retreats, and how long the world can hold its breath before someone makes a move that can't be undone. In Tehran, senior leadership is divided. Some believe Trump's unpredictability is theater, designed for domestic audiences and political leverage. Others argue it's precisely the lack of consistency that makes the threat real. They remember moments in recent history when warnings were dismissed, only to be followed by sudden and decisive action. That memory shapes how seriously these signals are taken now. When a leader refuses to clarify limits, planning becomes guesswork, and guesswork in national security is dangerous. Iran's military commanders have quietly increased readiness, not in ways meant to provoke, but enough to ensure they aren't caught off guard. Missile units conduct routine exercises, naval forces adjust patrol patterns in the Gulf. None of it is dramatic enough to trigger headlines, but all of it is deliberate. These are defensive moves, according to Iranian officials, yet every move is being watched, analyzed, and fed into intelligence assessments on the other side of the world. Inside Washington, similar calculations are underway. Intelligence agencies monitor Iranian communications for signs of acceleration or restraint. Analysts debate whether Tehran is preparing for talks or bracing for confrontation. The problem is that unpredictability cuts both ways. When a strategy relies on ambiguity, it becomes harder to distinguish caution from preparation or deterrence from escalation. Every signal can be read multiple ways, and not all interpretations lead to calm outcomes. At the same time, pressure is building internally within Iran. Sanctions continue to squeeze the economy. Inflation erodes daily life. Younger generations, already skeptical of their leadership, question whether confrontation with the United States is worth the cost. This creates a fragile internal balance. Escalation could rally nationalist sentiment, but prolonged hardship risks unrest. Iranian leaders must weigh not only external threats, but internal stability as well. Trump's strategy appears to count on this pressure. The theory assumes that sustained uncertainty, combined with economic strain, will eventually force Iran's leadership to choose negotiation on America's terms. But history shows that pressure does not always produce compliance. In some cases, it produces defiance, especially when leaders believe backing down would undermine their legitimacy at home. Meanwhile, U.S. allies grow increasingly uneasy. Publicly, they express support for preventing a nuclear Iran. Privately, they worry about being dragged into a conflict sparked by miscalculation rather than intention. Military planners across the region quietly review contingency plans, not because war is inevitable, but because unpredictability demands preparation. When no one knows where the red lines are, everyone prepares for the worst. What makes this phase especially dangerous is the absence of clear off-ramps. Traditional diplomacy offers steps, milestones, and mechanisms for de-escalation. A strategy built on fear offers none of that. It relies on the assumption that the other side will eventually yield before something breaks. But international politics is not a controlled experiment. It's shaped by personalities, pride, and pressure, all colliding at once. As days pass without resolution, the risk doesn't fade. It compounds. Each unanswered signal adds to the uncertainty. Each show of readiness raises the stakes, and somewhere between deterrence and provocation, the margin for error grows thinner. The question now isn't just whether this strategy can force Iran to change course. It's whether anyone involved can control what happens if it doesn't. In Tehran, debates quietly intensify. Hardliners push for visible demonstrations of capability, arguing that strength, rather than concession, sends the clearest message to Washington. Moderates warn against overreaction, stressing that any misstep could trigger irreversible consequences. Meanwhile, intelligence chiefs work to reconcile fragmented signals from the U.S., attempting to identify which threats are bluff and which are credible. Every exercise, every patrol, every statement is dissected for hidden meaning. In this atmosphere, even routine decisions are loaded with strategic weight. Across the Atlantic, Washington is no less consumed. National Security Council meetings stretch long into the evening. Analysts overlay satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and historical patterns to model Iranian responses. Every potential action, whether sanctions relief, military posturing, or diplomatic outreach, is weighed against countless permutations of Iranian reaction. What seems like a minor adjustment in force deployment can trigger hours of debate. because ambiguity breeds caution, and caution in this context carries its own risk. Regional partners, too, act in ways designed to hedge against uncertainty. Israel reviews its contingency protocols, balancing intelligence gathering with visible deterrence. Gulf states quietly reinforce air defense systems and port security. None of these moves are publicized, yet each is intended to signal both readiness and restraint. In a game where perception matters as much as reality, subtlety becomes a critical weapon. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens in both countries feel the intangible pressure of the standoff. In Iran, economic hardship colors daily life, fueling frustration and uncertainty about the future. In the United States, media coverage oscillates between alarm and analysis, leaving the public grasping for clarity. The human dimension, fear, pride, and hope, is ever present, even when negotiations are conducted behind closed doors. Ultimately, this stage of confrontation is defined by what isn't said. Silence, ambiguity, and careful observation dominate the battlefield of perception. Every move is measured not just for its immediate effect, but for the way it will be interpreted by the other side. The quiet is not peace, it is preparation, calculation, and the constant weighing of consequences. And in such a climate, the smallest misread signal could escalate into a crisis that neither side truly wants, yet neither can fully prevent. At the same time, Iranian military commanders operate under the pressure of two competing imperatives: deterrence and survival. Missile brigades rehearse scenarios that stretch from defensive retaliation to preemptive strikes, but the exercises are intentionally scaled to avoid creating an impression of imminent attack. Naval commanders in the Gulf run simulations to test response times against potential American or Allied maneuvers, adjusting patrol patterns subtly to both project readiness and avoid escalation. Behind closed doors, intelligence officials map out contingencies for every conceivable U.S. action, from targeted sanctions to limited strikes. Each plan carries the weight of the unknown. Each choice risks triggering the very conflict they seek to avoid. Diplomats on both sides tread cautiously. Channels of communication remain open but minimal. Regional intermediaries, often Gulf states or European allies, deliver messages with careful caveats, emphasizing that nothing should be taken as an irrevocable position. Every conversation is recorded, every nuance noted. Both Tehran and Washington understand that a misstep in these quiet exchanges, an ambiguous phrase, an overinterpreted gesture, could escalate tensions faster than public statements ever could. Meanwhile, the human dimension grows more acute. In Iran, citizens endure mounting economic strain. Prices rise steadily, unemployment bites deeper, and frustration simmers beneath the surface. Younger Iranians, many of whom have grown up in a world shaped by sanctions and international isolation, question the wisdom of confrontation. Nationalist rhetoric can rally a portion of the population, but prolonged hardship risks sparking dissent, strikes, or public protests. Leaders in Tehran must navigate the delicate balance between demonstrating strength abroad and maintaining stability at home, a task that becomes increasingly precarious with each passing week. Across the United States, media coverage amplifies the tension. Analysts, commentators, and politicians debate every reported move by Iran, every military adjustment, every intelligence leak. Public perception shapes policy indirectly. Officials know that any overt action will be scrutinized not only internationally but domestically. Political calculations intermingle with strategic concerns. The unpredictability of the situation feeds uncertainty at all levels, from senior officials to ordinary citizens watching the news. The standoff, therefore, exists in a liminal space between deterrence and provocation, between calculation and improvisation. It is a tension sustained by uncertainty, amplified by history, and intensified by the human element of fear, pride, and perception. Every day, without resolution, every silent exchange and subtle signal deepens the stakes. And the most perilous truth of all is that no one, neither Tehran nor Washington, neither ally nor intermediary, truly knows what will happen if miscalculation finally overcomes restraint. As the days stretch into weeks, the risk of miscalculation grows more acute. In Tehran, discussions have shifted from hypothetical scenarios to contingency planning for crises that may never arrive or that could arrive suddenly. Missile commanders debate the timing of exercises, naval officers adjust patrol routes, and cyber units quietly test defensive measures. None of these actions are meant to provoke, yet each carries the implicit possibility of misinterpretation. In intelligence assessments abroad, these subtle adjustments are cataloged, mapped, and compared against historical patterns. Analysts note minor deviations and ponder their significance, aware that in the world of high-stakes confrontation, even small signals can trigger outsized responses. For American policymakers, the uncertainty is equally consuming. Every step taken by Iran must be measured against both potential threat and potential opportunity. Could a routine military exercise mask preparations for a more aggressive posture? Or is it a demonstration of restraint meant to signal willingness to negotiate? The lack of clarity forces constant recalibration, producing a strategic tension that is exhausting, both cognitively and politically. Decisions that would normally be straightforward, troop movements, sanctions adjustments, diplomatic messaging, become fraught with risk because ambiguity leaves room for multiple interpretations, each carrying serious consequences. Inside Tehran, internal pressures intensify. The population feels the squeeze of economic sanctions, inflation, and currency instability. Public patience is finite, and younger Iranians, skeptical of both domestic governance and the wisdom of confrontation, voice frustrations in subtle but growing ways through social media, cultural expression, and private conversations. Leadership must weigh the external threat of American action against the internal threat of domestic unrest. Every move designed to project strength abroad risks fueling dissatisfaction at home. Decisions are no longer purely strategic, they are also political, social, and psychological. Perhaps most dangerous is the lack of clear off-ramps. Traditional diplomacy relies on signals, milestones, and confidence-building measures. Here, the only signals are subtle, often contradictory, and open to multiple interpretations. The absence of mechanisms for de-escalation means that every decision carries weight far beyond its immediate impact. Each missile test, each patrol shift, each intelligence assessment is magnified, creating an environment in which minor miscalculations could cascade into serious consequences. The tension is compounded by history. Both sides remember past crises, moments when misread intentions nearly led to conflict. These memories shape decision-making, adding caution, but also paranoia. Leaders must navigate a landscape where fear, pride, and perception collide, and where each small action can have global ramifications. In this phase, confrontation is less about visible clashes and more about the invisible calculus that guides behavior. The real battlefield is uncertainty itself, the endless series of decisions, counter-decisions, interpretations, and misinterpretations that determine whether restraint holds or escalation erupts. Every day without resolution ratchets up the stakes, shrinking the margin for error and reminding all parties that in a world governed by perception as much as reality, the line between deterrence and provocation is perilously thin. For American policymakers, the uncertainty is equally consuming. Every step taken by Iran must be measured against both potential threat and potential opportunity. Could a routine military exercise mask preparations for a more aggressive posture? Or is it a demonstration of restraint meant to signal willingness to negotiate? The lack of clarity forces constant recalibration, producing a strategic tension that is exhausting both cognitively and politically. Decisions that would normally be straightforward, troop movements, sanctions adjustments, diplomatic messaging become fraught with risk because ambiguity leaves room for multiple interpretations, each carrying serious consequences. Meanwhile, regional allies act in subtle yet consequential ways. Israel increases surveillance along critical borders, yet avoids overt provocations that could be misread. Gulf states reinforce air defense systems and port security, quietly signaling both to Tehran and Washington that they are prepared for contingencies without appearing confrontational. These precautions, while defensive, ripple through the intelligence ecosystem, adding layers of complexity. Every side is preparing for the worst while hoping to avoid it, a delicate balancing act in which timing, perception, and misinterpretation are all critical. Inside Tehran, internal pressures intensify. The population feels the squeeze of economic sanctions, inflation, and currency instability. Public patience is finite, and younger Iranians, skeptical of both domestic governance and the wisdom of confrontation, voice frustrations in subtle but growing ways. Through social media, cultural expression, and private conversations, leadership must weigh the external threat of American action against the internal threat of domestic unrest. Every move designed to project strength abroad risks fueling dissatisfaction at home. Decisions are no longer purely strategic, they are also political, social, and psychological. Perhaps most dangerous is the lack of clear off-ramps. Traditional diplomacy relies on signals, milestones, and confidence-building measures. Here, the only signals are subtle, often contradictory, and open to multiple interpretations. The absence of mechanisms for de-escalation means that every decision carries weight far beyond its immediate impact. Each missile test, each patrol shift, each intelligence assessment is magnified, creating an environment in which minor miscalculations could cascade into serious consequences. The tension is compounded by history. Both sides remember past crises, moments when misread intentions nearly led to conflict. These memories shape decision-making, adding caution, but also paranoia. Leaders must navigate a landscape where fear, pride, and perception collide, and where each small action can have global ramifications. As the standoff drags on, the quiet tension threatens to become more than an invisible chess match. It risks tipping into crisis. In Tehran, every decision is weighed against both external and internal pressures. Hardliners push for demonstrations of power, warning that perceived weakness could undermine the regime's credibility. Moderates caution that overreaction could provoke an irreversible conflict. The internal debate is intense, but the stakes are high. Misjudgment could ignite a conflict neither side wants, yet both are poised to respond if provoked. On the U.S. side, policymakers continue to balance deterrence with diplomacy. Ambiguity remains a deliberate strategy, but ambiguity is unpredictable. Every military exercise, every public statement, every intelligence report feeds into a complex calculus of risk and opportunity. Analysts map potential Iranian responses and model American reactions, yet no simulation can fully account for human judgment, misperception, or emotion. The very unpredictability meant to pressure Tehran also generates uncertainty within Washington and across the globe. Regional actors, from Israel to Gulf allies, remain on edge. They quietly adjust defenses, review contingency plans, and prepare for scenarios they hope never come to pass. Each move is a subtle signal, intended to communicate readiness without provoking escalation. Yet in a climate where signals are constantly scrutinized, the margin for misinterpretation is razor thin. A single misread action could set off a chain reaction with global consequences. For ordinary citizens, the stakes are real but intangible. In Iran, economic hardship and social tension weigh on daily life. In the United States, media coverage alternates between analysis and alarm, leaving the public to navigate an environment where uncertainty is constant. The human element, fear, pride, and hope, shapes behavior at every level, influencing decisions that could determine the course of history. And yet, within this precarious balance, there remains room for diplomacy. Quiet back channels, regional intermediaries, and careful observation offer avenues to prevent escalation, but only if both sides choose to engage and interpret intentions accurately. The window for careful negotiation exists, but it is narrow, and it is closing with every day that passes under the shadow of uncertainty. Ultimately, this confrontation is a test of strategy, patience, and perception. The silent phase, so easily overlooked by the public, is where the future of the standoff will likely be decided. Decisions taken now, in meetings unseen and signals barely perceptible, may determine whether the world moves toward negotiation or toward conflict. The consequences are enormous, and the world watches, even if most of what is happening remains invisible. As we follow this story, it's crucial to stay informed and engaged. If you found this analysis insightful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon to stay updated on breaking developments and in-depth reporting. Your engagement helps us continue delivering detailed, accurate, and thought-provoking coverage on global issues that affect everyone. Remember, international tension is not just a story for policymakers. It touches millions of lives in subtle but profound ways. By following carefully, questioning assumptions, and understanding the complexities behind the headlines, we can grasp the stakes and implications that might otherwise go unnoticed. Don't forget to follow us for more updates and in-depth breakdowns of global events as they unfold. This standoff, silent, strategic, and fraught with peril, is a reminder that in world affairs, much of the most critical action happens away from cameras and headlines. The quiet, invisible moves, the signals interpreted and misinterpreted, the decisions made in uncertainty, all of it matters. And in a world governed by perception as much as reality, the final outcome may hinge on who best understands the space between what is said, what is unsaid, and what is only implied.